My name is Celeste, and I'm 24 years old. 9 years ago on Father's Day, my entire world shattered when my dad looked me in the eyes and said, "Starting today, you are no longer part of this family." I was only 15. He handed me custody termination papers and kicked me out of the house, all because of a lie my stepsister told. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Last month, my stepmother called me begging for help to save her daughter. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe if family betrayal stories resonate with you, and stick around to hear what I said to the woman who helped destroy my life. I used to think I had a perfect childhood. Before everything fell apart, before I became unwanted, I had a dad who seemed to love me more than anything in the world. My early memories are filled with camping trips where he taught me to identify constellations, weekends spent on science projects for elementary school, and him running alongside my bike with his hand steadying the seat until I could balance on my own. He'd cheer, "That's my girl." His pride in me was the foundation of my confidence. When I was 8, my parents divorced. It wasn't particularly dramatic. They simply grew apart as adults sometimes do. My mom received a job offer in another state that was too good to pass up. After lengthy discussions that I was mostly shielded from, they decided I would stay with my dad in our family home to maintain stability with my school and friends. Mom promised to call every day and have me visit during summers and holidays. I missed her terribly, but having my dad helped fill the void. For 3 years, it was just dad and me. We developed our own little routines. Sunday morning pancakes, where I'd help mix the batter, movie nights with homemade popcorn, and bike rides through the neighborhood park every Saturday. He attended every school event, helped with homework, and even attempted to learn how to braid my hair with hilariously bad results that we laughed about together. We weren't perfect, but we were a team. Everything changed when I was 11, and Dad met Stephanie at his company's holiday party. She was beautiful, confident, and had a quick wit that made my dad laugh in a way I hadn't heard since before the divorce. At first, I was cautiously optimistic. Dad seemed happier, more energetic. When he wasn't with Stephanie, he talked about her constantly. I remember thinking that maybe our little family could grow in a good way. Stephanie had a 14-year-old daughter named Natalie from her previous marriage. The first few times we met, Natalie was friendly enough. She showed me her nail polish collection and talked about her high school. I looked up to her. She seemed so mature and put together compared to my awkward preteen self. I even harbored secret hopes that we might become like real sisters. 6 months after they started dating, Stephanie and Natalie moved into our house. Dad explained that we needed to make some changes to accommodate our new family members. My bedroom stayed the same, but many of the common areas were redecorated to Stephanie's taste. Family photos featuring my mother gradually disappeared. I told myself this was normal and tried to adapt. The changes weren't just in our home's appearance. Dad began to change too. He became increasingly concerned with pleasing Stephanie. Our Sunday pancake tradition was replaced with Stephanie's preference for family brunch at a local restaurant. Movie nights dwindled as Dad and Stephanie often went out alone. Our Saturday bike rides stopped altogether when Dad started golfing with Stephanie's brother instead. When I tried to talk to him about missing our time together, he'd ruffle my hair like I was still a little girl. "We need to make Stephanie and Natalie feel welcome, Pumpkin. We can do our stuff another time." But that other time rarely came. Natalie's initial friendliness cooled rapidly. She began making comments about how much space my things took up in the bathroom we now shared. She rolled her eyes when I talked at dinner and interrupted me frequently. When we were alone, she'd make cutting remarks about my clothes or hair, then laugh it off as just joking if I got upset. I started noticing small things going missing from my room. A favorite bracelet, notes from friends, a special pen Dad had given me. When I mentioned these disappearances, Stephanie suggested I was probably just misplacing things, and Dad nodded in agreement. Natalie would give me a small, satisfied smile when the adults weren't looking. My dad, who once defended me fiercely when a teacher falsely accused me of cheating, now frequently criticized me at Stephanie's subtle prompting. "Celeste needs to learn to keep her room tidier," she would say with a sigh, and Dad would lecture me about responsibility. "Teenagers need more structure," she'd suggest, and suddenly I had earlier curfews and more chores than Natalie despite being younger. I tried everything to maintain my relationship with Dad. I offered to help with yard work like we used to do together. I asked about his day and his projects at work. I even tried to bond with Stephanie by asking her to teach me to make her signature cookies. The more I tried, the more distant he became, as though my very presence was an inconvenience to his new life. By the time I turned 13, it felt like I was living with strangers. Dad no longer helped with homework, rarely asked about school, and missed my debate team competitions. When I brought home straight A's, Stephanie would say, "That's nice, dear," while Natalie received lavish praise for passing grades. Dad would nod distractedly at my achievements while enthusiastically celebrating Natalie's smallest accomplishments. I remember one particularly painful evening when I overheard Stephanie and Dad talking in the kitchen. "Natalie feels like you favor Celeste," she said. "You need to make more effort with her. She's sensitive about being in a blended family." The dad I knew would have pointed out how untrue that was, how he'd been bending over backward to accommodate them. Instead, he apologized and promised to do better, by the daughter who wasn't his. That night, I cried myself to sleep feeling like I was becoming invisible in my own home. By the time I entered high school at 14, I had learned to navigate the increasingly tense home environment by making myself as unobtrusive as possible. I threw myself into academics and joined the debate team, finding validation and purpose outside our house. My success in school became both my shield and my escape plan. I already knew I would need scholarships to attend college, as discussions about my future had all but disappeared from family conversations. My academic achievements seemed to further aggravate Natalie, who was now 17 and struggling in her classes. "Not everyone can be a perfect little genius like Celeste," she would sneer when her parents questioned her grades. Rather than encouraging Natalie to study harder or get tutoring, Stephanie began suggesting that my teachers must just really like me, or that the material comes naturally to me, diminishing the hard work I put into my studies. The dynamics at home continued to deteriorate. Dad started working longer hours, often not coming home until after I was in bed. When he was home, he was distracted and irritable. The man who once patiently helped me with math homework would now snap, "Can't you figure it out yourself?" if I asked for help with an assignment. I found small comforts and allies outside our toxic household. Ms. Williams, my English teacher, noticed my passion for literature and often loaned me books from her personal collection. "You have a unique voice, Celeste," she told me after reading one of my essays. "Don't let anyone silence it." Those words became a lifeline I clung to. I also formed a friendship with Taylor, a fellow debate team member who came from a warm, chaotic family of 6. Visiting her house was both wonderful and painful. Seeing her parents' genuine interest in their children's lives highlighted what I had lost. Still, those visits gave me glimpses of what healthy family life could be like. At home, I began noticing Natalie's increasing influence over both Stephanie and my father. If Natalie complained about a meal, we never had it again. If Natalie wanted to watch a show, it didn't matter what anyone else wanted to see. If Natalie made plans, the family schedule rearranged around her. Meanwhile, my requests were treated as inconveniences. There were warning signs I tried to address directly. When Dad missed my first major debate competition to attend Natalie's routine soccer game, I gathered my courage to talk to him. "Dad, I feel like you don't care about the things that matter to me anymore," I said. He looked annoyed and defensive. "That's not fair, Celeste. I can't be everywhere at once. Natalie needed support too." "But you haven't been to any of my events this year," I pointed out. "Not one." "You're being selfish," he replied, his voice hardening in a way that was becoming familiar. "Stephanie and I are trying to build a family here, and you're not making it easy." I retreated to my room, the message clear: I was no longer considered part of the family they were building. As tensions at home increased, I retreated further into books and studies. My room became my sanctuary, though even that space didn't feel secure anymore. I'd return to find things moved slightly, suggesting someone had been going through my belongings. Notes I left in drawers would be in different positions. Once I found a page torn from my private journal, though nothing was ever mentioned about it. One afternoon, I came home early from school due to a teacher workday and overheard a conversation that chilled me. Thinking I was alone, I quietly entered through the side door. Stephanie and Natalie were in the kitchen, unaware of my presence. "I just don't understand why she's still here," Natalie was saying. "Dad left years ago and I never had to live with his new family." "Your father wasn't as established as Greg," Stephanie replied. "But don't worry, Greg's prioritizing us more and more. He knows where his real family is now." I just want her gone before my senior year, Natalie said. It's bad enough having to share a bathroom. This is supposed to be my special time. We'll figure something out, Stephanie assured her. Greg's been talking about sending her to that boarding school his colleague's daughter attends. I backed away silently, heart pounding. When I tried to talk to Dad about what I'd heard that evening, he dismissed it as teenage drama and accused me of always trying to cause problems between Natalie and me. He hadn't even considered the boarding school option he claimed, though his eyes shifted away when he said it. In the months leading up to that fateful Father's Day, Natalie's provocations escalated. She accidentally spilled soda on my debate notes the night before a competition. She told her friends embarrassing fabricated stories about me that got back to my classmates. She began using my things without permission, wearing my clothes and returning them stained or stretched out. When I locked my door to protect my possessions, Dad removed the doorknob, saying, "There's no need for locks in a family that trusts each other." The irony was painfully obvious to everyone but him. Despite everything, I still harbored hope that my real dad, the one who had taught me to ride a bike and cheered my successes, was still in there somewhere. With Father's Day approaching, I saw an opportunity to try to reconnect with him. I spent months saving my lunch money and earnings from occasional babysitting jobs to buy him a watch, having it engraved with, "Always your girl, Celeste." I planned a special breakfast and even asked Stephanie for his favorite dinner recipes, hoping to create a perfect day that might remind him of the bond we once shared. I had no idea it would be my last day in what I still thought of as my home. I woke up before sunrise on Father's Day, my stomach fluttering with both hope and anxiety. I'd planned everything meticulously: French toast with cinnamon, his favorite fresh coffee, and orange juice in the special mug I'd made him in 5th grade that he'd once treasured. I tiptoed downstairs in the early morning stillness, savoring the quiet as I gathered ingredients. To my surprise, Natalie appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Need help?" she offered with an uncharacteristic smile. Suspicious, but not wanting to create conflict on this important day, I cautiously accepted. "You could set the table," I suggested, keeping my distance as I whisked eggs for the French toast. "Sure thing, sis," she said, the term of endearment sounding foreign from her lips. "I'll get the fancy napkins from the dining room." I should have recognized the warning signs: her unusual helpfulness, the convenient disappearances to get things from other rooms, her checking her phone with small smiles. But I was so focused on making everything perfect for Dad that I missed the trap being set. By 7:30, everything was ready. Dad came downstairs in his robe, seeming genuinely pleased at the surprise breakfast. Stephanie followed, complimenting the spread with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," I said, placing the carefully wrapped watch box beside his plate. My hands trembled slightly as I poured his coffee. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, the warmth in his voice giving me hope. As he opened the gift and saw the watch, something like his old smile flickered across his face. "This is very thoughtful, Celeste." For a moment, it felt like my plan was working. We ate breakfast together, almost like the family we used to be. Natalie was uncharacteristically quiet, checking her phone under the table. I caught Stephanie giving her subtle looks, but I was too caught up in the momentary connection with Dad to worry about it. After breakfast, as I was clearing the dishes, Natalie suddenly let out a dramatic gasp from upstairs. "Mom! Dad! Come quick!" The urgency in her voice sent everyone rushing upstairs. Natalie stood in the doorway of her room, tears streaming down her face. "My jewelry is gone," she sobbed. "My grandmother's necklace, my gold earrings, all of it." "Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" Dad asked, putting an arm around her shoulders. "No, I had it all in my jewelry box yesterday," Natalie insisted. "Someone took it." Her eyes shifted to me, and my stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. "Celeste," Stephanie said slowly, her voice dripping with false concern. "You've been up since early this morning, haven't you?" "I was making breakfast," I protested, feeling the trap closing around me. "Maybe we should check your room," Stephanie suggested to Dad. "Just to be sure." Dad hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "If Celeste has nothing to hide, she won't mind." The four of us marched to my room. I wasn't worried. I knew I hadn't taken anything. But as Stephanie opened my desk drawer with surprising directness, my blood ran cold. There, nestled among my school supplies, was Natalie's distinctive jewelry box. "That's not mine," I said immediately. "I've never seen that before." Dad opened the box. Inside lay Natalie's grandmother's necklace and several pairs of gold earrings. "How could you?" Natalie cried, her performance convincing. "That was my grandmother's. You know how much it means to me. I didn't take it." I looked desperately at my father. "Dad, you have to believe me. I was downstairs cooking all morning. Someone must have put it there while I was in the kitchen." Dad's face had transformed, hardening into something unrecognizable. "Enough lies, Celeste. The evidence is right here." "Natalie offered to help with breakfast," I said desperately. "She kept going back and forth to other rooms. She must have planted it." "Listen to yourself," Stephanie interjected. "You're accusing Natalie rather than taking responsibility. This isn't the first time things have gone missing, Greg." "I didn't do this." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Dad, please. Why would I steal from Natalie when I was trying to make today special for you?" Dad's voice went cold. "Maybe to pay for that watch. We both know your babysitting money wouldn't cover something like that." The accusation felt like a physical blow. I'd saved for months, eaten plain sandwiches while others had hot lunches, walked miles instead of taking buses, all to afford his gift. "Go downstairs," he said flatly. "We need to discuss this." In the living room, what awaited wasn't a discussion but a verdict already decided. Dad pulled out an envelope from his desk. An envelope that looked too official, too prepared to have been a response to what had just happened. "I've been patient, Celeste." He began, his voice clinical and detached. "We've tried to integrate you into this family, but there have been problems for months. Attitude issues, conflicts with Natalie, and now stealing." "None of that is true," I protested, my voice breaking. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Stephanie and I have discussed this extensively. I've consulted with a family lawyer about our options." He handed me the envelope. With shaking hands, I opened it to find a formal legal document. The title swam before my teary eyes: Petition for Termination of Parental Rights and Custody. "You're giving me up." The words felt impossible to say. "Starting today, you are no longer part of this family." My father said, the practiced nature of the phrase evident in its delivery. "I've contacted your mother. Until she can arrange to take you, you'll need to find alternative accommodation." "Alternative accommodation," I repeated numbly. "What does that mean?" "It means you can't stay here anymore," Stephanie clarified, barely concealing her satisfaction. "We think it's best for everyone." "You're kicking me out today. Where am I supposed to go?" Panic rose in my chest, making it hard to breathe. "That's not my concern anymore," Dad said, gesturing to the papers. "You have 1 hour to pack your essential belongings. Anything left behind can be shipped to your mother later." Natalie stood in the background, her earlier tears mysteriously dried. When her parents turned away, she gave me a small, triumphant smile. "Dad, please," I begged, my voice small and broken. "It's Father's Day. I made you breakfast. I bought you a gift. I didn't take anything. Please just listen to me." "The decision is final, Celeste." He wouldn't meet my eyes. 1 hour. I stumbled upstairs in a daze, unable to process what was happening. How could my father, who once checked under my bed for monsters and kissed my scraped knees, throw me away so easily? How could he believe I would steal? How could he have legal papers already prepared? In my room, I discovered more evidence of premeditation. My dresser drawers were partially emptied, items already boxed up. They had planned this, waiting only for an excuse to execute it. With tears blurring my vision, I packed what I could into 2 suitcases: family photos, school documents, clothes, and a few precious books. In my jewelry box, I found the bracelet that had gone missing months ago, apparently returned now that it had served its purpose in building a case against me. As I packed, I found other belongings damaged: pages torn from books, a deliberate scissors cut in a favorite sweater, my childhood teddy bear with stuffing pulled out. These weren't random acts. This was methodical cruelty. When my time was up, Dad came upstairs. Without a word, he carried my suitcases downstairs. I followed, numb and disbelieving. At the front door, he finally spoke. "Your mother said she'll arrange a bus ticket for you tomorrow. You'll need to find somewhere to stay tonight." "Where?" I asked, my voice small. "I don't have anywhere to go." He checked his watch. the expensive one he already owned, not the one I'd sacrificed to buy him. "That's not my problem anymore, Celeste." And then I was outside the door, closed firmly behind me. Through the window, I saw Stephanie put her arm around my father's waist as they turned away. The sound of locks being changed would stay with me for years. I stood on the porch where I'd once played, now a 15-year-old girl with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go on Father's Day, officially no longer anyone's daughter. I remained frozen on the porch for several minutes, unable to process the reality of what had just happened. The weight of the custody termination papers in my backpack felt like a boulder. Finally, survival instinct kicked in. I couldn't stay here. This was no longer my home, and I was clearly unwanted. With shaking hands, I grabbed my suitcases and began walking away from the house I'd grown up in. I had no destination in mind, just the primal need to put distance between myself and the sight of my abandonment. The June sun beat down mercilessly as I dragged my belongings down familiar streets that suddenly felt alien. 2 blocks away, I spotted a payphone at the corner gas station. With the quarters I kept in my wallet for emergencies, I called the only person I could think of, Taylor. When she answered, I could barely form words through my tears. "Taylor," I managed to choke out. "My dad kicked me out. I have nowhere to go." Her response was immediate and firm. "Where are you? I'm coming with my mom right now." I gave her the cross streets and sat on my suitcase, trying to make myself as small and inconspicuous as possible, as curious passers-by stared at the crying teenager with luggage. 20 minutes that felt like hours later, Taylor's mom's minivan pulled up. Taylor jumped out and wrapped her arms around me while her mother loaded my suitcases. "What happened, honey?" Mrs. Bennett asked as we drove away, her eyes concerned in the rearview mirror. Between sobs, I explained the morning's events. The Father's Day breakfast, Natalie's accusation, the jewelry planted in my room, and the custody termination papers that had clearly been prepared well in advance. "He had the papers ready," I said, the realization hitting me anew. "He was just waiting for an excuse." Mrs. Bennett's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "That's not right. You're 15 years old. He can't just throw you out." But he had, and the legal document in my backpack proved he'd been planning it meticulously. The Bennetts took me in without hesitation. "You'll stay with us until we figure something out," Mrs. Bennett declared, setting up their spare room. Taylor lent me pajamas and sat with me as I cried myself to exhaustion. The next day, I tried calling my father. The number I'd known my whole life had been changed, overnight. The finality of that action sent me into another spiral of tears. Mrs. Bennett made calls to my mother, coordinating the details of my relocation across state lines. "She's booking you a bus ticket for Wednesday," Mrs. Bennett informed me. "That gives us 2 days to help you get organized." Those 2 days passed in a fog. I attempted to go to school on Monday, hoping for normality, but broke down in Ms. Williams' English class. She took me aside, and I found myself telling her everything. "Let me make some calls," she said, her expression a mixture of concern and controlled fury. "There are resources for situations like this. What your father did isn't just cruel. It may not even be legal without a court approving the custody termination." But as Ms. Williams investigated, we discovered the grim reality. While the custody termination would indeed require court approval, my father had filed the paperwork and had a legitimate right to determine who lived in his home. If he said I couldn't stay there, no one could force him to house me. My mother had already agreed to assume full custody, likely unaware of the circumstances which smoothed the legal process considerably. "It's wrong," Ms. Williams said, frustration evident in her voice. "But sometimes the legal system moves too slowly to help in the moment." I spent Tuesday saying goodbye to the few friends I had, collecting final assignments from teachers and trying to process that I was leaving the only community I'd ever known because my father had decided I was disposable. Wednesday morning arrived with brutal speed. Mrs. Bennett drove me to the bus station, Taylor sitting beside me in the back seat, holding my hand. "You call us," Mrs. Bennett instructed as we unloaded my suitcases. "Anytime, day or night, and you can visit whenever you want." "You're still my best friend," Taylor said fiercely, hugging me tight. "Distance doesn't change that." The bus journey lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of staring out windows at passing landscapes, replaying every moment of my life with my father searching for signs I'd missed clues to when his love had begun to fade. Had it been gradual, or had it always been conditional? Had Stephanie and Natalie merely revealed a truth that had always existed? That his love for me was fragile and easily broken? My mother waited at the bus station, her face etched with concern. We'd maintained contact through calls and summer visits, but had never been as close as my father and I once were. Now she was my only parent receiving a child who'd been officially discarded. "Oh, Celeste," she said, embracing me. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were so bad." In her apartment, a place I'd only visited, never lived, I had to construct a new life. She'd hastily prepared the guest room, buying a desk and bookshelf to make it feel more permanent. The effort was touching, but nothing could erase the rawness of being unwanted by the parent I'd trusted most. The legal process continued in my absence. My mother received paperwork, made calls, and attended a court date in my former state. My father never appeared for the final hearing. "The judge granted the termination," my mother told me gently. "Your father gave up all parental rights. I have full custody now." Those clinical words represented the official end of my relationship with my father. He hadn't just kicked me out in a moment of anger, he'd systematically erased me from his life. The legal severing was complete. My first months in my new home were characterized by nightmares and anxiety attacks. I'd wake gasping, having dreamed of doors slamming, locks changing, and my father's cold, detached voice declaring me no longer family. My mother arranged therapy, but it was hard to open up about a pain so fresh and incomprehensible. School presented its own challenges. Starting at a new high school mid-semester, trying to explain my situation without breaking down, attempting to form connections when I now questioned my worth and lovability, each day was an exercise in emotional endurance. The hardest realization was accepting that I hadn't done anything to deserve what happened. I hadn't stolen jewelry. I hadn't been a problem child. I had simply become inconvenient to my father's new life, an obstacle to Natalie's desire to be an only child, a reminder to Stephanie of her husband's past. I had been sacrificed for their comfort, and no amount of good behavior could have prevented it. Some days, just getting out of bed felt like a monumental achievement. But slowly, breath by breath, I began to survive. Not thrive yet. That would come later, but survive. Junior year began in my new school, marking almost a full year since that devastating Father's Day. I'd spent the summer adjusting to life with my mother, who tried her best to help me heal while respecting my need for space. We were learning to know each other again, rebuilding a relationship that had been secondary for years. I threw myself into academics with an intensity that sometimes concerned my mother and teachers. Learning became my refuge, my grades a concrete measure of worth in a world where family bonds had proven dangerously unreliable. I studied late into the night, pushing myself beyond exhaustion, as though perfect scores could somehow prove my father wrong for discarding me. "Celeste," my mother said one evening, finding me still at my desk at midnight, "you don't need straight A's to deserve love. You know that, right?" I didn't answer because I wasn't sure I did know that. What I knew was that achievement was the one area of my life I could control. School counselor Dr. Myers suggested joining clubs to help me build new social connections. With reluctance, I signed up for debate team, the one activity from my old life that had given me confidence. During the first meeting, a girl named Aisha sat next to me, offering a warm smile and easy conversation. "You're really good at constructing arguments," she commented after hearing me speak. "Most people get emotional and lose their logical thread, but you stay focused." "Lots of practice," I replied, not explaining that I'd spent months mentally arguing my case to a father who would never hear it. Aisha became my first real friend in my new life. Unlike Taylor, who knew the before me, Aisha knew only the person I was becoming. More guarded, more driven, but slowly healing. She invited me to study sessions at her house, introduced me to her extended circle of friends, and never pushed when I was reluctant to talk about my past. Dr. Myers also helped me develop healthier coping mechanisms for the panic attacks that still occasionally struck. When you feel one coming on, name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste, she instructed. It grounds you in the present instead of the trauma. These techniques helped, but what truly began my healing was joining the community service club at Aisha's suggestion. Volunteering at a local youth center, I found purpose in helping children from difficult backgrounds. Their resilience inspired me, and their uncomplicated appreciation for attention and kindness reminded me that I was still capable of meaningful connections. One Tuesday afternoon, working with a 10-year-old girl on her reading, I had a revelation. As she sounded out difficult words, her determination unwavering despite struggles, I saw a reflection of my own persistence. We were both adapting to circumstances we hadn't chosen, both finding ways to move forward despite obstacles. "You're doing great, Zoe," I encouraged her. "It's hard, but you're not giving up." "My mom says I'm stubborn," she replied with a gap-toothed smile. "That's not always a bad thing," I told her. "Sometimes being stubborn means you keep going when things get tough." In that moment, I recognized my own stubborn survival. Despite everything, I was still here, still moving forward. The realization didn't erase my pain, but it reframed it. My continued existence wasn't just endurance, it was a quiet victory. High school graduation came 2 years later, a milestone I'd once assumed my father would witness. Instead, my mother cheered loudly as I accepted my diploma and the scholarship that would fund my college education. Aisha's family invited us to their home for a celebration dinner, treating me like an honorary daughter in a way that both warmed and wounded my heart. That summer, before leaving for college, I made one final attempt to contact my father. I wrote a letter, not accusing or angry, but informative. I told him about my graduation, my scholarship, my plans for the future. I included my new address at college and my phone number, leaving the door open for contact if he ever changed his mind. The letter was returned unopened, marked "Addressee Unknown." He had moved without leaving a forwarding address, his final statement that he had no interest in knowing the adult I was becoming. College represented true independence. In my dorm room, surrounded by peers who knew nothing of my past, I could reinvent myself. I chose to study psychology, driven by a desire to understand family dynamics and help others navigating similar traumas. The academic environment suited me. Professors valued the analytical thinking and work ethic I developed as survival mechanisms. Professor Jordan, my developmental psychology instructor, became a mentor after I wrote a paper on the impact of parental abandonment on adolescent development. "This shows remarkable insight," she commented, unaware I was essentially analyzing my own experience. "Have you considered research or clinical work in this area?" Under her guidance, I began to understand my experience in a broader context. My father's actions reflected his weaknesses, not mine. Stephanie and Natalie had manipulated a man who was vulnerable to manipulation. This understanding didn't excuse what he did, but helped me see it as less about my worth and more about his failings. Therapy continued throughout college, a commitment to myself that I would not allow my father's rejection to define my future relationships. "Trust will always be difficult for you," my therapist acknowledged, "but difficult doesn't mean impossible." Graduation day arrived, another milestone celebrated without my father. My mother Aisha and her family, and even Mrs. Bennett and Taylor, traveled to attend the ceremony. Looking at these people who had chosen to support me, I realized I had built a family of choice, people who stayed even when staying was hard. My first job after college involved working with at-risk youth, many from fractured families. I never shared my full story with them, but my genuine understanding of abandonment and resilience made me effective at connecting with teenagers who believed themselves unlovable. At 22, I signed the lease on my first apartment. As I unpacked my belongings, still traveling light, a habit from that day I had to fit my life into 2 suitcases, I came across the watch I'd never given my father. I had packed it during my hasty exit, unable to leave behind something I'd sacrificed so much for. I sat on my new couch, turning the watch over in my hands, reading the inscription, "Always your girl, Celeste." For the first time, I allowed myself to fully grieve, not just what I had lost on that Father's Day, but what I had never truly had, a father whose love was truly unconditional. That night, I placed the watch in a small box with other mementos from my past. Photos, school awards, the rare letters my father had sent during my mother's initial custody. I didn't throw them away, but I put the box on a high shelf. My past would always be part of me, but it no longer needed to be the central focus of my story. In the years that followed, I built a life centered on helping others while continuing to heal myself. I created boundaries and traditions that honored my needs. I learned to recognize triggers, Father's Day commercials, certain songs, even the smell of the cologne my father used to wear, and developed strategies for coping when memories surfaced unexpectedly. I dated cautiously transparent about my trust issues without burdening new relationships with expectations of healing me. Some connections faded quickly. Others lasted longer but eventually ended. I was learning that relationships could end without it being a reflection of my worth, a crucial lesson for someone whose core wound was rejection. By 24, I had established a stable, independent life. I had a career I found meaningful, a small but loyal circle of friends, and a growing sense of peace with my history. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me, but it had shaped me in ways I was learning to appreciate: my resilience, my empathy, my commitment to authenticity. I never expected to hear from my former family again. And then, 9 years after being declared no longer part of this family, my phone rang with a call that would test everything I'd learned about forgiveness, boundaries, and the person I'd become. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. I'd just returned from work, kicking off my shoes and contemplating whether to order takeout or cook something simple. My phone rang with an unknown number which I nearly ignored, probably another telemarketer. On impulse, I answered. Celeste. The voice was older but unmistakable. Stephanie, my former stepmother, the woman who had stood by while my father dismantled my life 9 years earlier. My hand tightened around the phone. How did you get this number? Your workplace website, she said. I've been trying to find you for weeks. I almost hung up then. What right did she have to search for me after all this time? But curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want, Stephanie? Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. It's Natalie. She's in trouble, serious trouble. I need your help. A laugh escaped me, sharp and disbelieving. You need my help after what you did? Please, she begged. Just hear me out. Things aren't what they seemed back then. I know we hurt you terribly. Against my better judgment, I listened as she explained Natalie's situation, how 27 Natalie had developed a severe drug addiction over the past few years. She'd recently overdosed and was currently in the hospital needing long-term rehabilitation, but lacking insurance coverage. Why come to me? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Stephanie paused before answering. Because you work with troubled young adults. You understand addiction and recovery resources. And because... Her voice faltered. I have nowhere else to turn. She explained that she and my father had divorced 3 years ago. He had remarried quickly and started a new family, cutting ties with Natalie just as thoroughly as he had with me when she became problematic in his new life. He has a pattern, I observed coldly. Yes, Stephanie admitted, her voice small. I see that now. Then came the revelation that sent my world tilting on its axis. Natalie confessed everything, Stephanie said. Years ago, during one of her first attempts at rehab, she told me about planting the jewelry in your room, about damaging your things, about all the lies she told to turn your father against you. I should have come to you then, but I was ashamed. The confirmation of what I had always known but could never prove hit me harder than expected. Tears burned behind my eyes as 9-year-old wounds reopened. So you've known the truth for years and only contacted me now because you need something, I summarized, anger building in my chest. I was wrong, Stephanie said quietly. So wrong. What we did to you was unforgivable. I've lived with that guilt every day. But right now I'm desperate. Natalie will die without help, and I don't know how to navigate the system. You do. I sat in silence, processing this surreal conversation. The woman who had helped orchestrate my expulsion from my home and family was now begging for my expertise to save the daughter who had deliberately caused my downfall. What exactly do you want from me? I asked finally. Advice on programs that might take her without insurance. Maybe connections you might have. Anything you can offer. Her voice broke. I know I have no right to ask. My first instinct was to laugh in her face and hang up. Why should I help Natalie after what she did? The vindictive part of me wanted to say no to let them struggle as I had struggled abandoned and alone at 15. "I need time to think about this," I said instead, surprising myself. "I'll call you tomorrow." After hanging up, I paced my apartment, emotions churning violently. I called my therapist for an emergency session, trying to sort through my conflicting feelings. "What do I owe these people?" I asked her. "Nothing, right?" "You're correct that you owe them nothing," she confirmed. "The question is, what do you owe yourself? What choice will allow you to continue your healing journey?" I spent the night reflecting on that question. Would helping them bring closure, or would it reopen wounds better left sealed? Would refusing help align with the person I was trying to be, or would it be a justifiable protection of boundaries? By morning, I had made my decision. I called Stephanie back. "I'll meet you tomorrow at the Riverside Cafe at 2 o'clock, I told her. "I'll bring information about resources that might help Natalie, but I want to be very clear. This isn't forgiveness. This is me choosing not to perpetuate the cycle of harm that your family created." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." The Riverside Cafe was neutral territory, a place I had no emotional connection to. I arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of the door, preparing myself for the shock of seeing Stephanie after 9 years. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her. The confident, attractive woman who had once commanded my father's home had been replaced by someone who looked much older than her years. Gray streaked her once immaculate hair and deep lines etched her face. She spotted me and approached hesitantly, as though expecting me to flee. "Celeste," she said, her voice wavering. "Thank you for coming." I gestured to the chair across from me, maintaining a professional demeanor. "Sit down, Stephanie." For the first few minutes, we engaged in the strangest small talk I've ever experienced. A woman making conversation with the stepdaughter she had helped cast out. Finally, I placed a folder on the table. "These are rehabilitation programs that accept patients without insurance," I explained. "Some have scholarship funds or sliding scale payments. I've marked the ones that have the highest success rates." Stephanie reached for the folder with trembling hands. "This is more than I deserve." "This isn't about what you deserve," I said evenly. "This is about what Natalie needs." She nodded, tears forming. "You've grown into an impressive woman, Celeste. Strong, successful, compassionate despite everything." "Despite everything," I echoed pointedly. Stephanie took a deep breath. "I need to tell you how sorry I am. Not just because I need your help now, but because you deserve to hear it. What we did was cruel and unforgivable." "Why?" I asked the question that had haunted me for 9 years. "Why did you hate me so much?" She looked down at her hands. "I was insecure. Your father talked about you constantly when we first met. How bright you were, how much you were like your mother. I was jealous of the history you shared, of the bond I couldn't touch. And Natalie," she hesitated. "Natalie had serious abandonment issues from her father leaving. She saw you as a threat. So you decided I had to go." "We manipulated the situation," she admitted. "I encouraged Natalie's behavior, validated her resentment. I subtly undermined you to your father. By the time that Father's Day came, he was primed to believe the worst." "He was my father," I said, my voice finally breaking. "He was supposed to protect me." "He failed you completely," she agreed. "After you left, things fell apart. He became depressed, drank too much. Our marriage couldn't survive the guilt, though he never admitted that's what it was. When I finally confronted him with Natalie's confession years later, he refused to discuss it." The conversation continued, painful but cathartic. Stephanie revealed the full extent of their campaign against me. The subtle poisoning of my father's perception, the deliberate isolation, the planned timing of my expulsion to minimize legal complications. "Would you be willing to see Natalie?" she asked eventually. "It might help her recovery to make amends." I considered this carefully. "I'll visit her once in the hospital. After that, I'll decide if I want any further contact." 2 days later, I stood outside Natalie's hospital room, steeling myself. The girl who had systematically destroyed my place in my family was now a gaunt young woman connected to monitors, her skin bearing the marks of long-term drug use. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You actually came." "Your mother asked me to," I replied, remaining by the door. Why would you help us? She asked, genuine confusion in her voice. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Our conversation was tense and awkward. Natalie alternated between defensive and remorseful, still struggling with accountability. I was just a kid, she said at one point. So was I reminded her. A younger kid who lost everything. Eventually, she offered what seemed like a genuine, if incomplete, apology. I didn't understand what I was really doing. I just wanted your dad to myself. I never thought about what would happen to you after. I provided her with the same information I'd given Stephanie, adding the name of a counselor who specialized in addiction and family trauma. I'm not doing this because I forgive you, I clarified as I prepared to leave. I'm doing it because holding on to hatred would only hurt me more. This is about my healing, not yours. As I turned to go, Natalie called out, He regretted it, your dad. He never said it directly, but after you were gone, he was never the same. I paused without turning around. That doesn't make it better. No, she agreed quietly. It doesn't. After the hospital visit, I faced a decision I never expected to confront. Whether to attempt contact with my father after 9 years of silence. Stephanie had reluctantly provided his current address when asked, though she warned he might not respond. For days, I drafted and discarded versions of a letter. What do you say to a parent who legally erased you from his life? In the end, I wrote from my truth without expectation of response. I told him about my life, my education, my work, my healing journey. I explained that I knew the truth about that Father's Day and the events leading to it. I didn't accuse or condemn, but I didn't absolve either. I simply stated facts and my experience of them. I'm writing not because I need your approval or even your acknowledgement, I concluded. I'm writing because I refuse to let your choices define my story anymore. I have built a life you know nothing about, and I am proud of who I've become despite the abandonment that could have broken me. This letter is not an invitation to resume contact, but a declaration of my freedom from the wound you inflicted. I mailed the letter without expectation, and true to form received no response. But unlike the returned letter of my college years, this one's purpose wasn't to reconnect. It was the final step in releasing the power his rejection had held over me. In the months that followed, I maintained minimal contact with Stephanie, receiving occasional updates on Natalie's recovery journey. I set clear boundaries. I would provide information and occasional guidance, but I was not responsible for Natalie's success or failure, nor was I interested in rebuilding a family relationship. Forgiveness, I discovered, didn't mean pretending the past never happened or welcoming my abusers back into my life. It meant acknowledging the reality of what occurred, understanding the complex human failings that contributed to it, and choosing to move forward unburdened by bitterness that would only harm me further. The 15-year-old girl abandoned on Father's Day with custody termination papers would always be part of me. Her pain shaped my compassion. Her resilience became my strength. Her experience informed my work. But she was no longer the whole of me. I had built a life filled with meaning, purpose, and chosen connections that proved more reliable than the family bonds that had failed me. I had learned that while we cannot choose our biological family, we can choose how their actions shape us. Whether we perpetuate cycles of harm or break them, whether we remain defined by abandonment or grow beyond it. In choosing to help Stephanie and Natalie despite their past cruelty, I wasn't excusing what they did. I was demonstrating who I had chosen to become, someone whose actions were determined by her own values rather than others' treatment of her. That knowledge brought a peace that no apology or reconciliation could have provided. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between justified resentment and compassionate action? What helped you decide? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story of family betrayal and healing resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming adversity. Your support means everything as we build this community of resilience together. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we create for ourselves becomes more precious than the one we were born into.